The rain poured down as Elena stood on the sidewalk, clutching a torn garbage bag that held everything she owned. Her clothes were stained. Her shoes had holes. Mascara ran down her cheeks. Behind her, the mansion she'd called home for 15 years stood like a fortress, and on the steps, her ex-husband David stood with his new wife, watching Elena with cold satisfaction. "Don't ever come back," David shouted over the rain. "You're nothing without me. You hear me? Nothing." Elena didn't respond. She just turned and walked away into the storm. But 3 months later, Elena would return to that same mansion. And when she did, she wouldn't be alone. She'd arrive with a billionaire by her side and a truth so shocking it would bring David to his knees. This is their story. 15 years earlier, Elena Rodriguez was a bright-eyed college student studying architecture. She had dreams of designing sustainable housing for low-income communities. She had ambition. She had fire. Then she met David Morrison at a charity gala. David was handsome, charming, and came from old money. His family owned a real estate development company in Boston. He swept Elena off her feet with expensive dinners, weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, and promises of a beautiful future together. "Marry me," he said after just 6 months. "We'll build an empire together. Your vision, my resources. We'll change the world." Elena said yes, but the dreams started dying on their honeymoon. David's mother, Patricia Morrison, made it clear that Elena wasn't good enough for their family. She was too young, too passionate, too Latina. Patricia never said it directly, but Elena felt it in every backhanded compliment and disapproving glance. "David, darling, are you sure Elena is ready for our social circles?" Patricia would say. "Perhaps she needs more refinement." And slowly, heartbreakingly, David started to agree. Within a year, he'd convinced Elena to put her architecture dreams on hold. "Just for now," he promised, "once we're more established." Within 2 years, he'd convinced her to stop working entirely. "I make enough for both of us. I want you to focus on being my wife." By year 5, Elena had become invisible. She hosted David's business dinners. She smiled at his colleagues' boring jokes. She organized charity galas where rich people patted themselves on the back for donating pocket change. And she watched her dreams fade like photographs left in the sun. Everything shattered on their 15th wedding anniversary. Elena had planned a special dinner. She'd spent all day cooking David's favorite meal. She'd bought a new dress with money she'd saved from her small monthly allowance. She'd even found the courage to bring up her old dream of going back to architecture school. But David never came home. At midnight, Elena called his office. No answer. She called his cell. It went straight to voicemail. Panic set in. Had something happened to him? Then she heard the front door open. Relief flooded through her as she rushed to the foyer. But David wasn't alone. He walked in with a woman Elena vaguely recognized, Jessica, his new assistant. A woman in her mid-20s with perfectly styled hair and a designer dress that probably cost more than Elena's entire wardrobe. And David's arm was around her waist. "David!" Elena's voice cracked. "What's going on?" David looked at Elena like she was an inconvenience, like she was a stranger who'd walked into his house uninvited. "I want a divorce," he said flatly. "Jessica and I are getting married." The room spun. Elena grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. "What, David? This is our anniversary. We've been married 15 years. 15 years too long," David interrupted. Let's be honest, Elena. This marriage has been dead for years. You've become boring, you have no ambition, you just exist. Each word was a knife. I gave up everything for you, Elena whispered. My career, my dreams, Nobody forced you to do anything, David said coldly. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. Jessica smirked from behind him, her hand possessively on David's shoulder. The divorce was brutal. David's lawyers were sharks. They argued that since Elena hadn't worked in 13 years, she'd contributed nothing financially to the marriage. They claimed she'd lived a life of luxury on David's dime and should be grateful for whatever she got. Elna's lawyer, a public defender she could barely afford, tried his best. But he was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and outresourced at every turn. The judge, an old friend of David's family, awarded Elena almost nothing. A tiny settlement that wouldn't even cover 6 months of rent. No alimony, no share of the house, nothing. The court finds that Mrs. Morrison, Ms. Rodriguez has no demonstrable skills or earning potential after voluntarily choosing not to work for 13 years. The judge declared, she's a capable woman of sound mind and body. She can find employment. Elena sat in that courtroom, numb. David wouldn't even look at her. Jessica sat beside him, whispering in his ear and giggling. Outside the courthouse, David's mother, Patricia, was waiting with a final humiliation. Here, Patricia said, shoving a garbage bag at Elena. Your belongings. David didn't want anything of yours in his house. Elena looked inside. Her clothes had been cut up, her photos destroyed. Everything she owned had been treated like trash. You were never good enough for my son, Patricia hissed. You should thank us for the years we gave you. That night it rained. Elena had nowhere to go, no family nearby. Her few friends had slowly disappeared over the years, isolated by David's controlling behavior and her own shame at what she'd become. She ended up at a homeless shelter, clutching that garbage bag and wondering how her life had fallen apart so completely. The shelter was called Grace House, and it was run by a woman named Margaret Chen. Margaret was in her 60s, tough but kind, with eyes that had seen every story and judged none of them. You're safe here, Margaret told Elena that first night. No questions tonight, just rest. For the first week, Elena barely spoke. She was in shock, traumatized, broken. But slowly, Margaret drew her out. Over morning coffee, over volunteering in the shelter's kitchen, over group therapy sessions where Elena heard other women's stories and realized she wasn't alone. What did you do before? Margaret asked one morning. I studied architecture, Elena said quietly. A lifetime ago. What stopped you? Elena laughed bitterly. I got married. Well, Margaret said thoughtfully, you're not married anymore. It was such a simple statement, but it cracked something open in Elena. She wasn't married anymore. For the first time in 15 years, she could make her own choices. Margaret introduced Elena to a job training program at the shelter. Elena started taking night classes to update her architectural software skills. She got a part-time job at a coffee shop. She started rebuilding one painful step at a time. And then, 6 weeks after the divorce, everything changed. The coffee shop where Elena worked was called Brew Haven, a small place in downtown Boston. It wasn't fancy, but Elena liked it. The owner was kind, the regulars were friendly, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was earning something that was truly hers. One morning, a man in an expensive suit walked in. He was probably in his late 50s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. He looked completely out of place in the modest coffee shop. "I'll have a black coffee, please," he said with a slight accent Elena couldn't quite place. "And whatever pastry you recommend." "The blueberry muffin is incredible," Elena said with a genuine smile. "Made fresh this morning." "Then I trust your judgment." They chatted briefly. His name was Richard Chen. He was in town for business. The conversation was pleasant but unremarkable. Until Richard looked at the sketchbook Elena had left on the counter during her break. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to it. Elena hesitated, then nodded. She'd been working on some architectural sketches, redesigns of homeless shelters, that could provide more dignity and privacy while being cost-effective. Richard studied the sketches for a long time, too long. Elena started to feel self-conscious. "These are extraordinary," Richard finally said. "Did you design these?" "Oh, they're just sketches, nothing professional." "Where did you study architecture?" Elena told him about her unfinished degree, her abandoned dreams. She didn't mention David or the divorce or the shelter, just the facts. Richard pulled out a business card. "My company is developing low-income housing projects across the East Coast. These designs," he tapped her sketchbook, "represent exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. Would you be interested in consulting for us?" Elena stared at the card. Richard Chen, CEO, Chen Global Properties. She'd heard of Chen Global. Everyone had. Richard Chen was a billionaire, one of the most successful real estate developers in the world. I'm not qualified. I never finished my degree. I haven't worked in architecture in 15 years. Your sketches say otherwise, Richard replied. Talent doesn't expire, Ms. Rodriguez, Elena Rodriguez. Ms. Rodriguez, I built my company by recognizing talent others overlook. I'm overlooking nothing in your work. Think about it. He left a generous tip and walked out, leaving Elena holding his business card and trembling with something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Elena took the job. She started as a consultant, working on one small project, a shelter redesign in Cambridge. But Richard quickly realized what David had been too blind and arrogant to see. Elena wasn't just talented, she was brilliant. Her designs were innovative, cost-effective, and most importantly, dignified. She understood what it meant to need shelter because she'd lived it. Her designs included privacy partitions, secure storage for belongings, natural light, and green spaces. These aren't just shelters, Richard said during a presentation to his board. These are homes, temporary homes, yes, but homes nonetheless. Elena understands something many architects don't, that good design isn't just about aesthetics, it's about humanity. Within 2 months, Richard offered Elena a full-time position, then a promotion, then a partnership on a major project. And somewhere along the way, something unexpected happened. Richard and Elena became friends. He saw her not as a charity case or a broken woman, but as the person she'd always been meant to be. Richard was a widower. His wife had passed away 5 years earlier, and he'd buried himself in work ever since. Elena reminded him that life could be full of purpose and joy again. Elena, for her part, found in Richard something she'd never had with David's true partnership. Richard valued her opinions. He celebrated her successes. He saw her as an equal. They fell in love quietly, without drama or grand gestures. It was mature, respectful, and real. 3 months after Elena had been thrown out of David's mansion in rags, she received an invitation. David and Jessica were hosting a charity gala at the Morrison estate, a fundraiser for underprivileged youth, the invitation said. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. Ignore it, Margaret advised. Why torture yourself? But Richard saw it differently. Or, he said thoughtfully, you could go. You could show them exactly who you've become. I don't need to prove anything to them, Elena said. No, you don't, Richard agreed. But maybe you need to prove something to yourself, that they don't have power over you anymore. Elena thought about it for days. Finally, she made her decision. She would go, but not for revenge, for closure. The night of the gala, a white limousine pulled up to the Morrison estate. David and Jessica stood at the entrance, greeting guests with practiced smiles. A chauffeur opened the limo door. First, Richard Chen stepped out in an immaculate tuxedo. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Everyone recognized the billionaire CEO. Then Richard extended his hand back into the limo. And Elena stepped out. She wore a simple but elegant emerald dress that Richard had insisted on buying her. Her hair was styled beautifully, but more than anything, her posture was different. Her head was high, her eyes were clear. She looked like herself again, maybe for the first time ever. David's face went white, his mouth literally fell open. Jessica grabbed his arm, confused. Elena? David whispered. Hello, David, Elena said calmly. Thank you for the invitation. I'd like you to meet Richard Chen, my partner. Partner, David repeated stupidly. Business partner and… Richard smiled at Elena, much more. Elena is the lead architect on our newest development project, a $50 million initiative to build sustainable housing communities across New England. The crowd that had gathered was silent, hanging on every word. David tried to regain his composure. Well, how nice. Elena, I'm glad you found work. Charity work is quite noble. It's not charity, Richard corrected coolly. It's business, profitable business. Elena's designs are revolutionary. She's being featured in Architectural Digest next month. David's mother, Patricia, pushed through the crowd. This is inappropriate. David, Jessica, you don't have to entertain this. Actually, Elena interrupted, there's something I need to say. Something I should have said 15 years ago. She turned to face the crowd, not David. Many of you knew me as David's wife. Some of you watched me shrink over the years, watched me disappear. Maybe some of you even felt sorry for me. Uncomfortable shifting in the crowd. People looked away. I let myself become small because I believed what David and his family told me, that I was nothing without them, that my dreams didn't matter, that I should be grateful for the scraps of dignity they allowed me. David's face was red now. Elena, this isn't the time or place. But here's the truth I learned, Elena continued, her voice strong. Nobody can make you small unless you let them. Nobody can take your dreams unless you hand them over, and nobody's cruelty defines your worth. She finally looked directly at David. You threw me out with nothing, David. You humiliated me. You broke me. And you know what? It was the best thing you ever did for me. Elena, because it forced me to remember who I was before you. It forced me to rebuild. And in rebuilding, I discovered something powerful. I was never nothing. I was never worthless. I was never the pathetic, boring woman you told me I was. Tears streamed down several faces in the crowd, including some of David's own relatives. I was always an architect. I was always creative and capable and strong. You just made me forget." Elena took Richard's hand. "So thank you, David. Thank you for freeing me to become who I was always meant to be." And then Elena did something that left everyone speechless. She pulled an envelope from her purse and handed it to David. "What is this?" he asked suspiciously. "A check," Elena said, "for the exact amount of the settlement you gave me in the divorce. I'm paying you back, every penny, because I don't want anything from you. Not your money, not your name, nothing." David stared at the check, speechless. "I didn't come here for revenge," Elena said quietly, now speaking just to him. "I came to forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I hope someday you find whatever it is you're really looking for. I don't think it's money or status or trophy wives. I think you're looking for the same thing we all are to matter, to be valued, to be loved for who you really are." She smiled sadly. "I hope you find it, David. I really do." Elena and Richard didn't stay for the gala. They left after 10 minutes, leaving David standing in his foyer, holding a check and confronting emotions he'd buried for years. As their limousine pulled away, Richard squeezed Elena's hand. "How do you feel?" "Free," Elena said, and she meant it. 6 months later, Elena's shelter designs had been implemented in 12 cities. Her work was featured in major publications. She'd completed her architecture degree, something she'd started 15 years too late and right on time. Richard proposed on a quiet evening in their shared office, surrounded by blueprints and dreams made real. Elena said yes, but on one condition: she'd keep her own name. She would always be Elena Rodriguez, architect. As for David, the confrontation at the gala had cracked something in him. He'd started therapy. He'd realized that his cruelty to Elena stemmed from his own insecurities, his need to feel powerful by making someone else small. He and Jessica divorced within a year. Last anyone heard, David was volunteering at homeless shelters, trying to understand what he'd done and trying, slowly, to become better. Elena's story isn't just about revenge or comebacks. It's about something deeper, the indestructible core of who we are. People can try to break you. They can take your money, your home, your dignity. They can throw you out in rags and tell you that you're nothing, but they can't take away your talent. They can't erase your dreams. And they can't destroy the truth of who you really are. Elena could have let bitterness consume her. She could have plotted elaborate revenge. She could have used Richard's wealth and power to destroy David the way he'd tried to destroy her. Instead, she rebuilt. She forgave. She freed herself. And in doing so, she proved something powerful. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming so completely, authentically yourself that the people who hurt you become irrelevant. David thought throwing Elena out would diminish her. Instead, it unleashed her. So remember this: when someone treats you like you're nothing, when someone tries to make you small, when someone tells you that you're worthless, they're not revealing truth about you. They're revealing fear about themselves and you. You are never just what others say you are. You are who you choose to become. Choose to become yourself. Fully, fearlessly, beautifully, just like Elena did. Have you ever had to rebuild after someone tried to break you? Share your story in the comments. And if Elena's journey inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of courage, transformation, and the power of never giving up on yourself. Remember, you are never nothing, never.